Hi everyone, my name is Mikkel and welcome to another Logic tutorial. In today's tutorial we're going to be talking about snare bombs. A snare bomb is essentially what happens when you mix a snare and a lot of reverb, and they're useful for transitions as well as for accenting certain parts of a song. A snare bomb sounds something like this. For today's tutorial we're going to be using two stock Logic plugins, the Drum Kit Designer as well as Reverb. First step into creating a snare bomb is to simply open up your Drum VST and load up a snare. In this case, we're going to be using Drum Kit Designer. So the first thing you want to do is just go ahead and pick out what type of snare you want. The tone of the snare is going to determine the tone of the snare bomb, easy as that. So for this example, I'm going to go for the SoCal 2 snare, which is kind of bright to give more of an accent to the snare bomb. For the next step, all you have to do is to just program one extremely high velocity hit on the snare center. So in this case, I have a velocity of 127, sounds something like this. So the next thing you want to do is to load up the Reverb plugin. Just to show the location, I could go all the way down to Logic, Reverb, Reverb, Stereo. All right, so now that I have the Reverb plugin open, there's three parameters that you should be keeping note of. One is the size, which determines how big your snare bomb is going to be. The K is going to determine how long your buildup is, as well as the fade out of the snare bomb itself. So a shorter decay will be a quicker snare bomb, longer decay is going to be longer buildup. And really important here on the right is the dry and wet parameters. You definitely want to have over 75% dry so you can really hear the snare hit in the snare bomb itself. So aside from the dry parameter, you also want to make sure that the wet parameter is rather high as well, just so that you can hear the reverb resonate. So this is what it sounds like right now. So after you choose your reverb parameters, the next thing you want to do is just bounce that snare hit in place. So I'm going to go ahead and select the snare bomb audio track that I created, create destination to be selected track when I bounce it in place, and I'm going to hit OK. So now this is the audio track I have, which is going to be just the snare hit, just ringing out with all that reverb. So the next thing I want to do is actually create a copy and place it well before. So now I have the same snare hit twice. So the next thing I want to do is simply just reverse the first snare hit. In order to reverse the snare hit, all I'm going to do is hit Ctrl-Shift-R. The last thing I want to do is just line up the original snare hit with the reverse snare hit track. And you want to do it so that the snare hit still can be heard. This is what it's going to sound like. Very, very small crossfade here. Now what you can do is just bounce the snare bomb or join it together. After you bounce both tracks together, what you can do is just line up these snare bombs with snare hits in order to create a transition or to accent a certain section of a song. That's basically it for snare bombs. Now one thing I want to note is that you don't necessarily need to use a snare for this. You can use a variety of other instruments. For example, what you could do is have a kick, and using that same kick effect, you could actually create a bass boom. All you would need to do in addition to adding reverb is just additional EQ to only include the subs. So using the stock EQ plugin in Logic and having it set up like this, where I'm accenting the sub frequencies, this is what it'll sound like. Now I know it's very tempting to have at least 200 snare bombs in your mix, but I highly recommend only to keep it to the final chorus or a part that you really want to accent in your mix. Now you could apply the same method into creating sub-bass bombs using a tom or a kick, or you could go crazy with hi-hats and create some crazy effect transitions. As always, be sure to like this video and subscribe to keep up to date with new content. Now if you have any questions regarding snare bombs, Logic Pro, or even how to tie your shoes, feel free to leave a comment in the section below. As always, I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. Hope to see you in the next video.